this episode certainly did deliver. And I mean it delivered. Justice real quick. It delivered. And what I'm talking about is this Flash episode, which is season 8, episode 11, called Resurrections. Oh, sorry. Resurrection, not Rections. Resurrections. Man, this episode was good. It really was. Let me give you a synopsis first before we get into this. Barry and Chester may have found a way to stop the Black Flame from hurting everyone else. Caitlin decides to handle a situation on her own, possibly putting more innocent lives in danger. So, it all connects. So, this episode picks up exactly where... Exactly, I don't know what, it was a piece of floating... I don't know what it was. But, yeah, it picks up exactly where the last episode, cliffhanger, left off. With the Black Flame communicating with Caitlin. Basically telling her it's Ronnie. Oh, excuse me. And it gives her, it's like, it talks to like, it's almost like it's doing Barry when he came out to Speed Force. It's talking like in memories and all that type of stuff. And she wants to help him, and he's like, go to where the snow falls and you know, all this type of stuff. And she has no idea. They trying to Chester and them trying to it cuts to no, you know what? I messed that up. It don't actually start with that. It actually starts with Iris and the situation with her, and then it switches over to that. So just a little correction there. It actually starts with Iris and her situation, then it cuts over to Caitlin. That's when we get to the Caitlin part and stuff. Actually, I could be wrong then too. Did it? I think it is either it. Cause I was doing. I had did other stuff before I recorded this. I should have recorded this right after I saw the episode. It either started with Iris, or a flashback. I think it started with a flashback. It either started with Iris or a flashback, and then transitioned over to Caitlin being at the house with the Black Flame and stuff. But anywho, you get the point. Iris is somewhere there in the beginning too. Like for the most part of the episode, Iris and her time sickness was like the other story in this episode. It was like the side story. Like even though the synopsis make it seem like that Caitlin is the one with the side story in truth. So I'm giving you a little minor spoiler. In truth, despite what the synopsis says, Caitlin's part of the story in this episode actually is part of the main story. Like I said, what it said in the synopsis, it says Caitlin decides to handle a situation even though on her own, even though it may cause more innocent lives, and make it seem like that part of the synopsis make it seem like it's part of his own side story. Don't have nothing to do with the main story, but it actually is the main story. I don't know why they worded it like that, but Barry and them find out a situation about Black Flame, and Caitlin's part is all the same story. The only side story, like I said before, is Iris and her time sickness and what happened in the previous episode. I think for the majority, this episode was about Black Flame and, you know, if it's really Ronnie or not, and then like it was like maybe about, I'd say 10 to 15 if you put it all together. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes of footage, you know, of Iris' side story, but the rest of the episode is mainly Black Flame. And it was like a basically one of those. It's one of those. They structured this episode as one of those where it is one of those things that divides. And this is a typical Caitlin story when it comes to Ronnie and anything that like impairs her judgment because of her grief for him. All she needed to know that it was Ronnie who came back. Now, the one thing they did figure out about Black Flame, which I thought was going to happen, was that he's connected to the singularity from season one, and which I'll give you to this one early. This is one of my one of the things I liked about the episode was that it has so much connection to season one. Like this, it felt like an old school version or old school season one episode because it has so much of it was called back. So much of it was about season one and the stuff that was left unanswered. Because me as a fan, I felt like when we watched Ronnie die in that singularity, I feel like it was just open ended. Like, what if he really didn't die? What if like they just separated and Stein fell back down while Ronnie got pulled to Earth too? But then it wouldn't make sense because then we did see him on Earth too, but it was his evil doppelganger, and what we know about the multiverse. Two of the same people can't occupy the same Earth, or they'll start getting sick, and eventually both of them would die unless one is either killed or leaves the Earth. So we knew it wasn't that because the Ronnie who called himself Deathstorm. Anywho, just ignore that little subtle hint. Was basically a lot. It was okay. He was just suffering from the multiverse sickness thing. So basically, it was like this episode does answer that question about what did he truly perish? Did he truly die in that singularity? And this episode does answer that question. So that's another little giveaway for you. If you ever been one of those people like me who wonder, did he truly die in that episode? Then this is the episode that actually gives you the answer. It took them a long time. But yeah, it became like one of those things where the scene that sets the rest of this episode up is where it transitions to the Team Flash. And Joe finally found more connection. Because remember how Barry in the previous, it was either in Reckless or in the other episode before that, Barry had assumed that it was more people that they didn't know about that prophecy was victims of the Black Flame. This episode confirms that it was via Joe, who did some digging, calling in some favors and found out there was a couple more victims. But yet, none of them had nobody could understand what the connection was, anything. They were just like besides the grief thing. And Caitlin comes in, which I didn't recognize. I didn't realize this until I really sat back and thought about it. Like even before I just did this video, it even came to my mind again. Like Caitlin really wasn't involved in the Black Flame investigation, because in this scene when Caitlin shows up to tell them about Black Flame visiting her, something happens that gives them more clarity of the connection between people, and to put it like I said without spoiling anything, Caitlin was a major key in this. And what you find out is that it make you realize what you didn't realize it, or maybe some of you did, but I didn't realize it until this episode. I was like, wait a minute, she really haven't been involved in the investigation, because she came in there and solved that piece of puzzle real quick, and yeah, it made me just sit back like, oh, okay. But then the plot thickens, right? So then it became a race to whether do we save Ronnie, do we trap Black Flame? What do we do? And another piece of set involving Cecile puts this even more at odds with each other, because Cecile has this moment with Black Flame that divides the team even more. Because now, because of this incident, the one half of Team Flash thinks something else, and the other half thinks one thing. And it's like almost like a civil war, and it's basically Team Flash versus Caitlyn and Frost. Cause Frost stick by Caitlyn especially after everything they've been through, they just went through in the previous episodes. So she's basically Team Caitlyn, while everybody else is Team Flash, and so to speak. And that's the crux. That's what this episode really gets good, is when this divide. But if it's not kind of cheesy, because we always see, they always does this, but I forgive it. I forgive it in this episode because of the way they executed it. Even though it's like the same type of story that we always see, one person thinks one thing. Like this, like, okay, the last time, just to throw a example out there, when this is like one of those divides where one people think one thing, the other people think, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And the one example I want to throw out there was DeVoe. Remember how Barry was the one who was certain that they bit bad was DeVoe, because of all the run-ins with the future villains, who kept telling him that his future enemies, that like not just enemies, like they was telling him like Abracadabra, I think Abracadabra, Zoom, or maybe not Zoom, but Abracadabra was some more people that kept talking about the future and his future villains, and they kept mentioning DeVoe. Oh, it was Salvatore Barry. That was the other person. It was Abracadabra and Salvatore Barry who mentioned in front of everybody that Barry would eventually. They mentioned DeVoe, and Salvatore Barry even said that they haven't gotten there yet. So he confirmed that DeVoe was going to be an upcoming villain for them. But the thing was, what was cheesy about it was my point is, when time came, they was like, oh, no, it can't be him. That he don't look like the person. Maybe it's a different DeVoe, but no, there's so many other DeVoes. The cheesiness, how they try to play it, that it was multiple people with the last name DeVoe, but we know for a fact that it was that DeVoe, and even Barry knew that. But it was a cheesiness of it. Knowing all this, instead of believing Barry, they decided to divide and think differently, and that's what they do here. You got one person thinking one thing, and another person thinking this. And basically, one group is thinking rationally, and one group is thinking irrationally. And you can already tell which one's the irrational group, which is Caitlyn, and Barry, and it was the rational one. And that's what this episode becomes once it leaves Iris' time sickness to a later point. It becomes that. It becomes about this divide of who's wrong, who's right, what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing. Should you stand behind somebody even though probably they making a big mistake? It was these debates that come up that we already have. And that's what I was saying. Like, that's what I kept saying. Like what I said with one of my earlier reviews. We with Caitlyn, when I told you that awful line of Frost said, "Oh, you're asking us to believe in the impossible." Yes, because you're first of all, Frost, you're the impossible, and yes, you're seeing the impossible every day. So why shouldn't y'all believe? And it's just like that. It's like, haven't we gotten to a point where stuff like this shouldn't be an issue, right? We had, by this point in the series, y'all should be where it shouldn't really be an argument. It should be point blank. Oh, yeah, you're right. I could be not seeing this clearly. Yet we're still here when we can still have these arguments about if someone's not seeing something clearly or not. But the episode was so good. Unlike that episode with Barry and them about his father, with hotness. And this episode, the difference is they executed it better here, using something from the past, versus when the episode with the hotness, where they executed it so trash that it just made me sick. But yeah, here it was executed perfectly of using something from the past and making something new out of it, because it actually gave you light, and they do shine light on something that, if you was a fan of Ronnie and Caitlin's love story, you do get a little bit of backstory that we didn't see that took place before the start of season 1. So they do give you that. To wrap this video up, this episode was a good episode. It checked all the boxes. It was, even though it was a rehash of something, but the rehash was good and well executed. I would give this episode I'll give it a 9 out of 10. It wasn't a perfect 10 episode, but it was good enough. Despite my little nitpicks about what I found wrong with it, like the whole argument between who was right and who was wrong. Even though I did not like it, it did not take away from the show. It just wasn't a perfect all around episode. Despite that, I'm not even using that as a negative, but it just wasn't a perfect all around episode. So that's why I gave it a 9. But let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode of The Flash. There is a little thing with Iris, and at the end, and there's a little hint. They do reveal too. If you haven't seen this episode, I forgot to say this before I wrap this video up. They do reveal who Black Flame is and whatnot. But if you enjoyed this episode and this video, I keep saying episode, you enjoy this review of The Flash, and you hit this button right there in the upper right corner for all of my reviews. And if you enjoyed this video so much, you want to support the channel, all you gotta do is hit that like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell, do all those great things, because I enjoy giving you more content, and your feedback helps me upgrade, it helps me get better equipment, it helps me bring you more amazing content, like I'm going to upgrade this camera eventually. And as always, hitting you on these videos for more of my amazing content, but don't go anywhere. Got gameplay coming up for you guys. And maybe another review. Who knows? Peace.